Hey everybody, welcome to All In, episode number 4. This week I interviewed Chad Isenhart, International Coordinator for Foursquare Disaster Relief. We will explore how responding to disasters can result in advancing the mission of God. You will hear about a place that had no gospel witness for more than 450 years, and now a house church has been planted. You will hear lessons learned along the way, pitfalls to watch out for, and how you can get involved. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsors, people like you who are passionate about fulfilling the mission of God. To learn more, visit us at jeffroper.com. You are listening to All In. I'm your host, Jeff Roper. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you live out the mission of God in your life and around the world. Chad, why don't you tell us your story and maybe tell us a little bit about what Foursquare Disaster Relief does, how you got involved in it, and how this relates to our engagement in the mission of God.
Yeah, I got started with missions about 6 years ago, and initially I kind of was really seeking the Lord of what kind of missions do you want to call me to, and I really felt more kind of the compassion, helping people out, and using that as a vehicle to share the gospel. But I didn't really know how, or didn't necessarily have a school to go to, and so I started to research some different ways to get mentored, and was able to be mentored by an organization with a missionary couple who really took me under their wings, and initially we were doing kinds of programs with their initiatives to feed children, and so we were measuring have they grown, has the program been a success, or as the meals that we're giving them, is that enough, and but as I got to minister to these kids, more and more I was able to hear these kids talk about what they're learning in school, and they're saying things like Bible stories from that they've learned, and this isn't a Christian school, this is just a public school, but they're saying these Bible stories in music form, and then I hear more that they're taking that back to their families and telling their families what they learned at school, and then the families kind of end up coming back to the church and hearing more about what Christ is doing. And so I saw how by meeting people's physical need, the children's physical need, so they can get a better education, that then they're reaching their families, who are then reaching others. And it was at that time that I really found that was really what the Lord was calling me to do, is use different means to share the gospel. And I've never grown up thinking that I'm a pastor or necessarily a preacher. Those aren't necessarily my giftings, but I am very much called and called to share the gospel. And so it was an eye-opening experience when I was in Haiti. It was about 6 or 7 years ago, where I got to see how ministering through that I was able to share the gospel, individuals to people, and then meet their families and talk more about it. And as time progressed, I was able to go from kind of just more of the compassion types of ministry with feeding and school programs, to then getting into disaster relief, which is another way of meeting people's physical needs and sharing the gospel. And so my journey kind of went a couple different ways as time progressed, but really just seeing how the Lord, there's not just one way to share the gospel. The Lord uses several different vehicles based on people's different giftings and what they've called them to do.
Now, one of the criticisms that I often hear from people when they hear us talking about disaster relief and all of that, they say, why are we involved in disaster relief? We're a church. We're supposed to be planting churches, teaching the Bible. Why in the world do we need to get distracted with doing disaster relief?
Yeah, I hear it all the time, and it's a battle to try to change a lot of, I wouldn't say the older generation, but the generation that really understands maybe what Foursquare specifically is kind of called to. And I just spoke today at a conference where we are an extension of Foursquare missions and an extension of the Foursquare Church in the U.S. and the globe. And so our mission and our running lanes as Foursquare Disaster Relief is no different than what Foursquare as a whole does. Is we want to plant churches, we want to make disciples, and we want to see people come to love and know Jesus Christ as a personal Savior. We just happen to use a crisis to be able to have the time to use that as a vehicle to get into communities where we probably wouldn't be able to be invited to otherwise.
Yeah.
And so in like a place like Tohoku, Japan, where after the tsunami and earthquake that happened there's a place in northern Japan, Tohoku, where there hasn't been a presence of the gospel in 450 years. And at that 450 years ago, Christians were martyred for their faith. So there wasn't any presence of the gospel, no churches, no anything, no missionaries. But because we came in at the onset of the relief efforts, and we were able to just minister to people, talk to them, hear their stories, cry with them, help them clean up their debris and move things around. And it was a slow progression because they were a little hesitant to allow outsiders to come in. But slowly, people started to ask more questions and get to build a relationship. And now, now we're baptizing people in a place where there hasn't been a presence for 450 years. And so if you say, what is the difference between what normal Foursquare, missiology is and what we do is, it's no different. We just use the vehicle as the way to come in, as opposed to sending somebody there that's new and doesn't know anybody, and which is a great way to do it too. I'm not saying anything against that, but in a place like Japan where they're very hesitant to outsiders, especially kind of up in the northern areas where it's, even coming from Tokyo up there, they look at those, Tokyo Japanese folks as a little bit of an outsider. It's hard for them to even minister as Christians.
Yet out of that horrible disaster that happened there, 2 years ago, something like that. Out of that, it allowed the Foursquare Church of Japan, in partnership with Foursquare Disaster Relief, to actually get a gospel witness there. Now, did they end up planting a church in that community?
Yeah, it's more of a home church. It's
That's very viable.
Yeah, so it's a small, it's growing, but it's they're very eager, in looking to look. And so, when people tell me, that what we do is different than what Foursquare does, it's one and the same.
Yeah, I remember back when I was involved more in Foursquare Disaster Relief, because you and I have a good history in this. We were both catapulted into this part of Foursquare Disaster Relief by the Haiti earthquake, and that was quite an experience. And I would have conversations with people, and they would say things, even in the face of the Haiti earthquake, where almost 300,000 people had died, and they would say, "Why do we need Foursquare Disaster Relief in Haiti? Shouldn't that be the Red Cross or somebody else?" And my response to them was always, we help the Foursquare Church respond to a disaster. Just like if a disaster happened in Tacoma, Washington, because I happened to be in Tacoma at the time having a conversation with someone. I said, if a disaster happened in Tacoma, how would the local Foursquare Church of Tacoma want to respond to that? And we simply help them do that. And out of that, you see the gospel go forward. So you saw it in Japan. Where else have you seen this become an opportunity by which God expresses His love and compassion through a local Foursquare church?
Places like the Philippines, after the massive typhoon and hurricane, they call it typhoon there, but it came in and just wreaked havoc on the whole country, or part of the country. And I came in and I traveled with the national leader, Val Chavez, and we went from church to church, to home, and slept on the floor of what was left of churches, or some when there wasn't, and just ministering, hearing people's stories, and I'm actually losing where we were going with that. what was your question again? Sorry,
Just more success stories.
Yeah.
About how, where else have you seen the gospel advance and the churches pursue the mission of God as a result of partnering with Foursquare Disaster Relief to respond to a crisis?
So like so in the Philippines after the typhoon, the hurricane, I traveled with the national leader around the country and visited churches and homes that were just completely devastated, and it was very interesting. One night we were sitting around. It was kind of a campfire because they had no electricity, no running water or anything, and we had to pack everything we needed in. And at the time, it was so dangerous to bring in food because people were so desperate that there was looting and robbing and all that kind of stuff. So we tried to hide the food that we were bringing in, and it seemed like every home that we went to, every church that we went to, they could really care less about the food. I mean, they needed it, and they were really thankful. But the fact that the national leader and some guy from the U.S. would show up, listen to their stories, cry with them, sit and eat and sleep where they're sleeping on the floor, and work through their network of pastors and leaders, meant way more to them than anything else that we would do. So, you compare it to the Red Cross or Salvation Army or some of these large World Vision. They're coming in, they're dumping in 1 million meals and just kind of spreading it across. But where we were different is we're working through local churches so that they can minister to their own people and their communities. And so coming in and saying to this church, hey, we want to give you some things, some tools, some resources to help you. Because a lot of times the pastors get overlooked because they want to help their flock, their community. So we want to make sure you're good and you're taken care of, and then we want to help you to reach out. And that meant the world to people, and and just to sit around and hear stories, and that was so impactful to the victims of there, and then I was just in Turkey recently working with Syrians and Iraqis coming into Turkey because of the ISIS conflict, and some of them are coming in as Christians, some of them are coming in from the majority faith of that region, and again, we were going from some homes to homes, bringing things like clothes and food and baby supplies and that we didn't tell people we were doing that, but people would say, "Come into our house and let's sit together." And so it was during Ramadan, so they weren't eating, but they were offering us water, and which is they don't even drink during Ramadan, but they were they wanted us to be there and they wanted us to be their guests, and so we're sitting there and they talked to us about my grandmother's very sick and she's had a fever for days and we don't have the money to go to a doctor, and can you pray for her?
So these are Muslims asking you
if we can pray for because they hear that our God can heal.
Wow.
And so literally we were laid hands on these the women that were with us would lay hands on these individuals, pray for them. We would talk about scripture in the Bible that talks about Jesus as the teacher, talking about healing and his stories of healing back in the Bible, which they really relate to because they know all those stories anyways. We say that same God is alive now and he is wanting to heal you. And home after home, they'd want to hear about this. And we're selling, doing it all through stories and through experience. And it was an eye-opening because here we are, we're on the border of Syria and Turkey where, every day there's rebels coming back and forth on each side.
Yeah, and we see the news every day of the tragedies that are happening there.
So you see all that, but then you see these families that are, just they're people and they're looking for hope, and they're just tickled that we would come and honored that we would sit with them, and just talk about soccer, and we talk about, what was it like at home, and what do you miss, from home, what kind of food, and just kind of conversate, and then. Your grandmother's sick, or your son's sick, or you need a job. Can we pray for a job? Or sometimes we are able to connect them to a business where we knew there was a job.
Wow. Because one of the things that happens in a crisis is it's very dehumanizing.
Absolutely.
And when you go into a crisis situation and you can reintroduce their humanity to them, like what you're talking about, you feed, you respond to the medical crisis or the physical threats and crises, but also to the emotional, mental crisis that they're having. That they're not a news event. They're human beings in a crisis, and you were able to do that by partnering with the Foursquare Church in Turkey and really making them shine and be the hero.
Absolutely.
Wow.
My philosophy when I go and respond is I prefer never to be the one to hand out anything. I always have the national leadership or the local pastor or, somebody there be the one. And because I don't want anybody to look and say, we need that white guy to come back and give us, food. It's always, man, the Lord provided, and I knew the pastor didn't have any funds, so I don't know where he got it, and so some more of those miracles kind of come to their mind, and it's it's amazing to just to see how open they are, and how dignified. I mean, the Muslims there have some of them had come 2 days before we had met them from Syria.
Yeah.
I mean, they left with bombs blowing up in their village. I mean, one gal had lost her leg right as they were leaving, had to cross a river with an amputated leg, but just to sit and talk about soccer, and she's smiling and she's having fun.
After just a couple of days ago, she had lost a leg. And just to because we were opening that door of conversation and just talking, and they're smiling, they're laughing, and they're you guys need to eat with us. You need to come back for dinner. You need to. And so again, it's bring that dignity that we would come, we would sit, and so it's not as much about the food or the relief, where and I don't want to talk about other organizations who do things, but I think that's what's so. That's one of the coolest things about Foursquare and Foursquare Disaster Relief and Foursquare Missions is it's not about how many meals we feed or how many people we touch or give filtration, but it's more about how many of those have we made a real relationship with, how many of those have we connected them to a local church, and how many of those of them are going to come to know Jesus and exactly, because we have a singular passion, and that is to make disciples of all nations, and the only way you really make disciples is through relationship.
Absolutely.
And in a crisis, that creates an incredible opportunity for this global family of ours to rally to the local context and say, we are with you, to stand with you as you serve these people who are suffering. And obviously, we're not saying we'll give you bread if you'll become a Christian. We're not doing that at all. It's not connected to some manipulative form of evangelism. It is simply the expression of an authentic faith that says Jesus has compassion on you and your suffering. Therefore, we as his hands and his feet are demonstrating that to you. And you're seeing lives transformed.
In many countries that I get to travel to, I hear the exact opposite. That a lot of other religions, whether it be Muslim, whether it be Buddhist, Hindu, they really go out there and they do give out a lot of food and aid. But it's if you come to the church and if you're a regular or the temple or wherever it may be, so there's a lot of stipulation on if we give you your food, you're going to need to believe in what we do. Whereas we're not forcing it to you, and if you didn't come to the Lord today, we're still gonna provide for you, and we're still gonna say we care for it and we love you, and just continue to work on that relationship.
What are some other where are some other places that you've seen the gospel advance through responding to a crisis like this?
Haiti was a great example of maybe when the earthquake happened, it was a very kind of I wouldn't want to say unhealthy church, but there was a lot of internal things with the national church there, and I think through the partnership of so many churches from the U.S. and coming in and saying we want to support you,
right, and
we want to be a part of that and setting up systems and And out of that, I think last number I heard we had 13 or 14 churches, which initially I think when we got there was maybe 4.
Yeah, amazing.
And they weren't necessarily very healthy churches,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still a long way to go there.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, it's a process.
But on one hand, there is some things that we probably did wrong there as well in terms of dependency and really kind of doing things our own way instead of really working together with the Haitian church to figure out what's best for their country.
Yeah.
And so we're learning, but to look back at Haiti and say that things didn't go well is a fallacy. I mean, it's gone well. The gospel is being moved. Haitian lives have been changed, and the church is stronger there, and people are being taken care of more than they were.
Yeah. Well, you bring up something here that I'd like to pursue with you for a few minutes about the whole learning curve, and we all have good intentions, and sometimes we have bad actions that lead to unintended negative consequences. Right. And of course, we saw that on a magnified scale in Haiti, not only perhaps with any of our response, but just globally. I remember watching the Haiti situation where the only means of entrance into the city had become the airport because everything else had been destroyed. And a very famous activist and a very famous actor wanted to do a photo op and show that they were compassionate, and they flew into this airport that was the only means of entrance into the entire city that had just suffered this crippling disaster. And so they had to shut the entire airport down so these 2 people could come in there and get their photo op and say, hey, look, we're doing some good work here. And then they get on the plane and they leave. When that airport was only thing that airport needed was first responders bringing emergency aid, emergency shelter, emergency food. And we as just good intentioned people make similar mistakes all the time. What are some of the no-nos that you have observed, either by your own experience, or with the team, or that you've seen people do? That are maybe kind of common things that happen that may sound good on the surface, but the outcome is really going to be contrary to what you want to see happen.
One of the most recent things that I actually experienced firsthand was I was in the Philippines. I was traveling around with Val Chavez, who's the national leader of Foursquare Philippines, and we're traveling around, and him and I are literally sleeping on the floor of what was left of a church, which was nothing, and we're getting texts or calls or from different things, and he's hearing that there's these U.S. pastors that are in the country, working with different churches, whether they're Foursquare or not. And he came to me and it was just like, do you know these pastors? And do you know why they're here? What are they doing? And I didn't know. I didn't know why they were there. And you can kind of just see his countenance kind of say like, well, why wouldn't they just let me know?
Yeah.
And they were, some of them I'm sure were given large sums of money to churches that maybe didn't need the help, or maybe were exaggerating the need that they had, and I compare it to in the U.S. If in my church in Tacoma, if right across the street, there's an old folks home that starts to burn, and we're trying to help there, but some church from Kansas City decides to come up and help, but they help another church on the backside. And I find out that they're helping, but they didn't tell us when we're right across the street.
Yeah.
Just let us know we're here. We're not trying to control you, but it'd be nice to know if we could work together, or maybe you could stay at my church. In the U.S. we would understand that completely.
Yeah.
We would say, if you come into my city, let me know.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I think a lot of people internationally just think I can do whatever I want, and there's no consequences, and it's not hindering anything. But in reality, it's we talk about our Foursquare family and the relationship, and that hurts a lot of people in the international community. And so I think, making sure that you're working through the right channels. And so connecting with Foursquare Disaster Relief is your first, we can connect you. We can figure out how to make it work best. If we're not working in that country, or we don't have a national church, we still might have a connection for you. If we do have one, but we're not there, and we just are working through the national church, connecting through the national church. And sometimes the national church may say, be blessed and go work with this other pastor. But it's more about just kind of accountability, letting people know what you're doing, and especially in a lot of third world countries, finances tend to be an issue, just to make sure that there's accountability with that. And so that would just be one of the major things, is just working kind of within the system. We have a system, and some people tend to think it's kind of that we're being gatekeepers or anything, but more so we're just making sure that, like, the donor money that you're giving is going to the right place.
To the right thing. Yeah, my experience with that has been as well that you're really not trying to control what they're doing. You're trying to actually help them succeed in what they want to do. That, there's this wonderful characteristic about Americans. There's two things that are very true of us as a people, and it's one, we have a get it done mentality.
Right.
If there is a disaster, we are the first ones jumping in. We don't hesitate. Second thing is, we are a very generous people. We will give. Now, those two strengths become weaknesses sometimes if it's not guided by wisdom. And we do see that often where we go, we've just got to do something. I remember in the Haiti situation, at the height of it, because it was on the news 24/7, people were, we've got to go, we've got to go, we've got to go. And our questions for them were, number one, are you a certified first responder? If you're not, you cannot go, because all you'll be doing right now is eating the food and drinking the water of the people who need it. And they would go, oh, because we had that impulse. We have to go do something. Right. There's another trait about us as Americans that the people often refer to us as having a cowboy mentality.
Absolutely.
And we just say, well, we're just going to go do something. And, we go, well, we don't care if it's, we're speaking within our own family of Foursquare churches. And, in America, it's very common. We have this independence idea. Well, we don't care if it's Foursquare or not. But outside of the U.S., there's actually a very strong family ethos that when, if Val Chavez finds out, there are Foursquare churches coming in right across the street from us, and they're not even touching base with us. I thought that was family.
Right, exactly.
It is very important outside of the U.S. This family spirit means something to everybody outside of the U.S. It's not as strong, unfortunately, in the U.S. mindset, but outside of the U.S., it is essential.
Absolutely.
What other things have you observed?
I think it's well-intentioned people, so I want to get that point across.
Of course.
We don't discount anything that their heart is feeling.
No.
Because that is the Lord. But many times, they don't know what the needs are, and they're trying to, So there's one time in Haiti where a group had a large. I don't want to get too in depth with it. But they had a large amount of things that they thought was really needed in Haiti, and probably about 2,000 or 3,000 pieces of this thing. Materials, and so they connected with us, which was the right way, and said, "Can we get those down there?" And at the time, that was really early. Customs was a nightmare. There was no system for customs for bringing things in, and we just said we can't ship it. We can't. And we really said for the amount of money that it would cost to buy all of those, we could get a whole lot more help in Haiti immediately. Well, they decided to go elsewhere or do it on their own, and so they ended up having a team of, 100, maybe 100 plus people fly down to Haiti, which is a fairly large expense for 100 people to fly to Haiti. And they all ended up carrying on or checking some of the material with them, and got to tarmac. At the time, there was no terminal, so they just got to tarmac, unloaded, and the officials there said, "What are all these?" And they explained what they were and what they were going to do with it. And they said, "You can't bring that in right now." And I don't know if it was a huge astronomical fee that they were going to charge because they didn't know if they were going to sell them or, but so it ended up that it wasn't even used. It left on the tarmac, and they didn't have a connection to actually go into Haiti because they didn't know where to go. We didn't have anything set up by that time really, and they ended up popping right back on the plane, flying back home, and And
so that was a potential tens of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely, that ended
wasted.
And I don't know what happened with what they brought. I don't know if the government ended up selling them or giving them away, or if they just rotted on the tarmac. I mean, but it was well-intentioned people, but they wanted to do it in their time, and they didn't want to wait till the proper time when we actually, because we could have used it down the road a little ways when we found out how to ship things in. Get free customs declaration for relief goods. But at the onset, they were so chaotic down there that they weren't allowing it. So it's that mindset, like you said, that cowboys, we got to get it done now, and we're going to do it however we feel is the best way. But in reality, we don't know everything as Foursquare Disaster Relief, and I'm the first one to say that. But we do have a few notches on our belt of disasters that we have responded to and kind of have learned things, and that was just such a shame because it was a lot of money and it ended up not being able to help.
Whereas in a case like that, if they will listen to wisdom, gain a little bit of knowledge, it would have helped them actually be resoundingly successful at the very thing they were desiring to do, which was help Haiti.
Absolutely.
And that's in disaster relief, helping people overcome their emotional response to it in order to gain a wise response. Speaking of Haiti, I remember starting to do some research into this shortly after the earthquake there. And there were a couple of books that really informed my thinking on this. One of them that I'll mention is called The White Man's Burden.
Great book.
And we'll include this in the show notes, a link to it. That book opened my eyes like nothing else. And learning both that book and another book I read about on the history of Haiti, that back 50 years prior, Haiti had been an exporting country. It was called the Pearl of the Caribbean.
Right, yep.
And when U.S. aid went in there and started giving away free food and free aid, it completely destroyed the economy.
Right.
And here was a country that had a thriving, they make some of the best coffee I've ever had. I love Haitian coffee. They could make a fortune off it.
Yeah.
But their entire economy imploded because all of a sudden now everything was free. And if you think about it, if you're needing to feed your family, would you rather go to Safeway and buy the food, which supports the employees at Safeway and the farmers who produce the food in your country, or would you like to have this free food from an outsider? Well, everybody took the free food.
Right.
And it destroyed the farms, it destroyed the bodegas, the kiosks, all the markets.
Yep.
Everything was wiped out because of free food. And one of the things that book brings out is that we really ultimately, this burden that he calls the white man's burden, that we think we have to fix everybody, his whole point is we can't fix everybody.
Right.
They can only fix themselves, and we can help and we can serve, and there are ways that we can do it. And you've seen that yourself.
Well, speaking of another book is When Helping Hurts.
Oh yeah, great book.
Is another one, and they talk about asset-based community development, and it could even be they say the ABCs, but asset-based community relief too.
Yeah,
is that every country has assets.
Right.
They may not have the financial asset fully to the extent that we would consider, but they have other resources, whether they have tractors to
exactly.
a truck to move relief goods, or volunteers that will go out and do things or whatever. And I think that's the other thing, is we just come in and with our agenda and our way of doing relief, and do it, and then don't involve anybody, so they don't have any skin in the game.
Exactly.
And so to this day, there are still tent camps in Haiti 4 years later where people would rather live in a tent, which is horrendous conditions.
Yeah.
But they get everything paid for.
And they would choose to live there rather.
Food, medical care. Some of them even still have homes. They
But
have a home, but they live in the tent cities because they get the free aid. And so they may go back to their home every once in a while, but they will live in these tent camps because they can get all these different governmental programs.
I have a little mantra that I tell people. And you tell me if you agree or not. It won't damage our relationship if you disagree. But my mantra in doing compassion work, whether it's disaster relief or compassion work, is never do anything for anyone that they can and should do for themselves.
I agree completely.
Can and should.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two dynamics. Can they do it and should they do it? Like this case that you just mentioned, which is a classic. Sometimes the best thing that will ever help some of these conditions is to do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they must, it's like it says in Proverbs, the appetite of a worker is good because it drives him to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have to step back and let them do it themselves, because only they can help themselves.
Right.
They're responsible for themselves.
Absolutely.
At that point.
Absolutely.
We can help overcome the things that they can't, and compassion has to do that. But ultimately, passion must be guided by wisdom. Well, if somebody out there, whether it's a church, an individual, a local pastor, is saying, I want to be involved, and I don't want to do it with harm. I don't want to do any damage. What would you recommend would be some practical steps they could do to get involved in disaster relief?
Yeah, I think, like you said, we can list a couple different books on the bio or whatever, and so getting into some books just about a lot of them are missional books as well, because especially in terms of what we do, missional is it's about what we do. It's not just relief. So understanding what we do as Foursquare missions and how that relates to what we do relief wise. And then some of these other books just about our white man's burden and when helping hurts. We also have a training that for in the U.S. If we're talking about relief in the U.S. as well, that it gives you some framework for responding in the U.S.
Okay.
And kind of getting under the covering of Foursquare Disaster Relief and kind of getting in the system, which there's trainings all over the U.S. that we offer.
So they can connect with Foursquare Disaster Relief and find out more information about that.
And that's on the Foursquare.org website.
Okay, we'll include links in the show notes.
Yeah, Foursquare disasterrelief.org will have all that on there.
Okay, great.
And now that's a kind of a beginning step. Beyond that, it really depends on kind of where you personally want to go, whether it's your church, where if you're wanting to kind of empower your church to be able to respond locally, kind of talking about more preparation. How do we actually set up our church as a distribution center?
Okay, yeah.
Or to be able to help the community. Internationally, it's more about getting a lot more of how to work within different cultures. Because if you're going to go over and do relief, you got to know how to work within a culture. Because maybe not that specific culture, because you don't know right away which culture, but learning how to adapt to culture and things not to do and then we're continuing to work on more trainings for the international side.
Okay.
The international one is a little bit more difficult because there is so many layers of things to
it's complicated. Yeah.
Whereas in the U.S. it tends to be that this is our culture for the most part. And English speaking is most of you have pockets where there isn't, but we're continuing to try to establish more on the international arm. But it's a lot more expensive internationally too, and so if people are wanting to go overseas, and be a part, is just contacting us, letting us know what your heart is, what your skill set is, what do you really feel, and then looking at maybe how we can tailor kind of connecting you with some different resources and trainings.
And some needs that would actually be on the
Yeah.
field, because it's not just, hey, I want to do something,
Right.
it's what does the field
Right,
need? It's
absolutely.
always field driven.
But like in the Philippines, we've had, I think, 4 churches that have come over after. This is after the initial, and then we've had some building teams that have come over.
Okay,
We've
great.
had some teams that have come over and helped just kind of do crisis intervention, kind of debriefing,
Okay.
counseling, that have been very, very helpful.
So do you find it very good for a church to take on the response more of as a long-term thing?
Yeah.
Because we know that once Anderson Cooper stops talking about it, it's
right.
off of all of our radar. But the lives are still broken,
Right.
and we need a long-term. That's why the church, the local church there, we're partnering with it, because they live there.
Yeah.
They're not going to pull out.
Right. And so the challenge that I would have for people that are interested is if you're really interested, don't let your first emotion drive you, because in reality you're probably not going to be able to go right away. It might be a week to 2 weeks to a month later, but then like you said, a lot of people fizzle out because they get sidetracked.
Yeah.
But really saying, Lord, give me a heart for people longer term as this disaster helps, because a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, they're forgotten.
Yeah.
And that's when they really they really need somebody to come by and come back and sit around a fire and talk about how they're doing, and
Yeah.
can we help you, can we pray for you, can we support you, and that's where the real need is, because a lot of times at the onset you can get a lot of food and water.
Yeah.
But the real care is down the road.
Yeah.
And that's the same in the U.S. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so often there's so much food and clothes that
Yeah.
come in, but then people are still working on rebuilding their homes 5-6 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Heck, you
and
can go down to New Orleans and see
it's
this.
still nothing,
you know?
and you're thinking, well, everybody was so interested for a year or two there,
Yeah.
and then now it's gone. So.
Yeah, yeah, we do have a short attention span at times. And I think developing that missional concept of it's long term, it's responding to needs on the ground as needed with the people that are there, that we partner with them. Our goal is to make them shine.
Right, absolutely.
And the golden rule of treat others the way you'd want to be treated. How would you want to be treated if you were the one in that disaster? You don't want somebody showing up with 6 tons of top ramen and bottled water, and then 6 months later you're still without a home, or you're still in a crisis situation. But they're back home thinking, hey, we fixed that problem.
Yeah.
Well, they have top ramen.
Yeah.
They're good.
Well, and, I've had several teams that have come with me that they come over and they want to help, they want to be around, but they'll work with the locals during the day, and they'll get sweaty and do whatever, but then they end up going down the road and staying at a 4-star hotel that wasn't damaged.
Oh,
And they don't eat the food that's served at lunch because they're worried about getting sick, and and that is just the hugest offense to and if you really talk about missiology of becoming all things to all men, I mean
the incarnational approach. You got to live there with them. Well, Chad, it's been great talking with you. What would be a way that if people want to connect with you or Foursquare Disaster Relief, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our website, FoursquareDisasterRelief.org,
Okay.
or on the FMI, on the Foursquare mission, the Foursquare Church website.
Foursquare.org.
There is link for disaster relief
Okay.
on there, and we have all of our updated stories on there. We'll have Instagram feeds of photos from the field when I go places. I also do tweet when I do go internationally, and that's I'm Project Eisenhart is my tweet name, and I kind of keep that for when I travel. So a lot of times I'll post a picture of something more, something we're doing today in a different village, or some testimonies. And then on the website as well, that has information about some of our trainings that we are offering.
Okay.
And beyond that, there are connection points to getting directly in contact with one of our team if your questions are outside of some of these things that are on there. So we're always willing to
Okay.
talk about what's going on and where you feel the Lord's calling you.
Okay, great. And then one more thing, when you're not traveling all over the world and helping respond to global disasters, you have a little business on the side called Eisenhart Leather. Tell me a little bit about. Let's spend a minute or two talking about this.
It's eisenhartleather.com if you want to Google that or
Yeah.
check it out. It started out as a way to kind of de-stress from a lot of the crisis that I deal with a lot. And I was an art major in college, and so I love to work with my hands, and I was a ceramics sculpture kind of a guy that I studied, and so somehow along the line I started to just kind of doodle around with leather stuff, and it's exploded in making bags, wallets, watch straps, iPad case, you name it. I mean, people have purses for gals. I don't have a retail store. I basically make things customly to what people want, and so I do that, and it helps offset some of my family's costs to be able to continue to do the relief work I do, and so it's a blessing as well as
so it's a little bit of business as mission as well.
It absolutely is, because it's it helps us to be able to do.
Now that you got a beautiful bride and a baby on the way. And
November we have our first child, and so.
Well, and I can vouch for your work, Chad. I have 2 watch bands that you've made for me. I have both of the watches here with me, and I also have a great toiletry bag that you made for me.
Yeah.
And I have a whole list of other leather items that I plan to have you make for me as finances allow. So, well, Chad, it's been a joy to be with you and to take this time. And folks, get in touch with Chad. Get in touch with Foursquare Disaster Relief. Find out what you can do to make a difference in the world. God bless you.
Well, we're done now. Thanks for listening. This is Jeff Roper reminding you that the mission of God is too grand for mediocrity or average living. You were created for a purpose, and that purpose is found in the mission of God. It's your life. Now go live it.